Hello, people. It's Friday evening. It is 2000 p.m. UK time. It's time for the Gin and Tonic Show. Gin and Tonic Show. Today is going to be a little bit different. As you can see, we have a moose here, and this moose is a talking moose, and it's going to give us a little bit of background. Welcome, you moose, you, and he's going to be talking about some historic events and something that you've all wanted to know about, and that is about the history in the beginning of Islam, the split between the Shias and the Sunnis. So this is something that is, I think, highly interesting because it's something that you very rarely hear anything of. So I'm very happy that we've got it straight from the moose's mouth, who is going to be telling us about this. So, Gin and Tonic Show, welcome to the panel. We've all seen Mr. Moosestaffah, and Rob is back from his holiday. Now, unfortunately, I didn't even have time to catch up with anything because my microphone was acting up again. It suddenly was mute and I had to restart everything, so I didn't even catch anything. I did not catch up on what has happened because he was sorely missed last week. And I'm sure that we're going to have Thunder going to be joining us in a minute. So that's cool as well. Rob, welcome back. Are you all
Good
fresh and
evening.
rested?
A warm welcome to our guest as well. I did listen in last week. I was driving back from holiday when I was listening in, and that was an interesting show. So good to be back, and looking forward to the show tonight.
Brilliant. Okay, Thunder is on his way. Then all I need to do is say hi to the people in the comments, in the chat, in on Facebook and on YouTube, because there's two different social media platforms where you can watch the Gin and Tonic Show. Now, we were criticized for what happened last week, where Thunder got emotional and criticized people, and he got very into it. Now, what I did is I said to him, look, don't do this, and we talked about it, we discussed it, but the thing is that we value free speech here. So what we try and do is not go towards the person, but criticize the ideology, not to the person. And I told Thunder last time, please don't do that, because this is not the value of our show. This is not the level that we go to. But I'm not going to go and say, listen, immediately shut up and do this and be very strict about this, because we are a free speech zone. And if anybody has an emotional opinion about something, they should be able to voice it, whether it is uncomfortable or not, whether it is uncomfortable for others or afterwards you feel bad about it yourself. These things happen. Now, people have criticized me that I did not immediately jump in and that I was not strict enough. But that's not my role here. I mean, I can only tell people, look, we don't normally go and attack people. We address issues within Islam. But if somebody at that moment gets aggro and for some odd reason does feel that they need to voice their opinion more strongly than usual, well, then that is the case, and you need to tolerate that. I mean, we're not a show where we constantly go about and try to insult people. We don't do that. But if somebody gets emotional, well, then so be it. So you can't just criticize the entire show for somebody. I mean, I get emotional. I've called people fuckheads and get the fuck out of here. I've done that because we are people. We are human beings. I don't do that every single time. And this is not the level that I want to be at. But sometimes it just happens because I get angry. And this is exactly what happened to Thunder last time. Now, he apologized afterwards. And for me, this is an issue. This is done and gone. Okay, so I'm going to continue saying, yes, we address Islam, we critique, and we don't attack, and we don't get personal, because we don't normally do that. Now, if somebody goes and criticizes the entire show for one time that this has happened, well, I'm sorry, fuck you. Doesn't matter. And there's somebody. It's a pity I don't have this on cue here. I should have a row of buttons, because there's a guy in South Africa, comedian Joe Parker, and he's one of my big heroes, and I've spent many hours together with him on different shows in different places when he was still active. And he has this brilliant saying. He says, listen, if somebody feels offended by something that we do here on stage, you are entitled to feel offended. And if you feel that it's too much for you to handle, please come up to me and tell me that you are too offended and that you are going to leave so I can tell you to fuck off. And that is exactly the way that I feel. If you feel offended by something like this, then I'm sorry. I'm not going to make excuses for this. I'm just going to say we continue to say this is not our level, and if it does happens, it happens. That's it, finished. Right? So that for me now is dusted and done. So, Jinn and Tonic Show, we have 3 ways that you can participate. One is go to the chat while the live stream is running. You can go ask questions, you can make comments. As you can see, we have a special guest today, so I advise you to have either a digital or an analog notepad. So if you do have questions, if you want to make remarks, write them down, and then afterwards we're going to have a session where you can voice opinion or questions or something like this. The third way is you can go and watch this on the later archive on YouTube or on Facebook. And then if you still haven't had enough of Jinn and Tonic and Islam, you can join us on the Discord server afterwards, where you can voice your opinion without it being recorded, without it being published afterwards. So those are the ways that you can participate, and you can watch and either be part or just be an observer. Now, we focus on Islam because we know more about Islam than we do about other ideologies. Okay, so this is what we address. We don't always go and say, all right, because this is like this in Islam, this is like this in Christianity, and in other whatever religions or ideologies. We don't do that. We try and focus on Islam and stick to Islam. We try and let the Quran speak. We try not to go into the scholar and hadith battle that you sometimes see online. We don't see much value in that, because anybody can find these things, and then you have one hadith saying this, the next one saying this, the same with the scholars. It doesn't make sense. We categorically condemn any kind of abuse, oppression, slavery, violence, misogyny, anything like that. All right, so if somebody comes here and says, well, Islam is good and it's all wonderful and cozy and that, I'm sorry, no, it's not, because it does not categorically condemn slavery, misogyny, or child abuse or something like this. And like I said, we embrace free speech, and we try normally to be just, human beings, decent human beings. And if you want to comment, question, correct, or anything, you're welcome to do so. All right. So having said that, Thunder, welcome. You were a latecomer, and I was just talking about you because on the previous, on the archived one on YouTube, people were criticizing us for what happened last week, and I just set the record straight. I don't know if you heard that.
Well, I think
you don't have to say anything, Thunder. You don't have to say anything about this, all right? Okay.
Okay. Right then, I'll certainly say hello to the panel and our guest this evening, Moosestaffahh. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Rob. Hi, Rob. Haven't spoken to you in a while, so it's good to see
Good
you.
evening. Hi, how are you doing, Thunderous?
Fine, thank you very much. Let's continue.
Great stuff. What we're going to do is we are going to go to the Quran, read a couple of sentences, because we're coming to the end of chapter 6. And then we're going to go straight. Thunderous, can you just mute, because I'm getting a lot of feedback through. Then what we're going to do is going to go over to our Moosestaffahh, who's going to talk to us about Shia. All right? So what I need to do now is go and show you the beautiful last couple of sentences of the Quran in chapter 6. Remember, we went here, we showed the sentences that don't fleece orphans, blah, 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 follow my path, ignore others. And then it continues without any kind of break, and suddenly says, in 154, we gave Moses the Torah with everything. Now, for people who have not seen this before, I take a sentence from the Quran, which can be, 15 pages, I don't care. I try and find the essence of that sentence, and I try and condense it as much as possible. So if you go to chapter 6, sentence 154, and you look at this in the Quran itself, you will see that this is a lot longer. And it uses different words. And it gives you a lot of superfluous nonsense, which I am just simply suppressing. I'm just saying this is the essence of what the sentence says. If you want to read along, you can do so. It is on every, a normal Quran, chapter 6, 154. There are different numbering schemes and different variants of the Quran, but in the standard 1924 Hafs version, this is what you will see. We gave Moses the Torah with everything. In 155, it says this is a book. So follow it and be afraid. Why you should be afraid, I don't know. Then in 156, it says, in case you complain, it was only revealed. No, in case you complain, it was only revealed to two groups. Or if you complain that you would have been better with the book, you have clear guidance and mercy. So if you turn away, you are unjust and will be punished without mercy by a merciful God. 158, do they want evidence? When it comes, it's too late. Now, I don't know why a God will say, if you want evidence, well, yeah, sure, I'll send you the evidence, but it's going to be too late anyway. So what's the point of sending you evidence? In other words, there is no evidence. And that is what the Quran says about itself. There's no evidence for any of this. 159, if you split into sects, God will judge you. Well, we're going to see today how that works, and that they did. So it's actually quite good timing. And then in 160, it says, good deeds count tenfold. So this is, I don't know if people remember, we have this numbering, we have this point system in Islam, which is a very selfish system where you can gather points for doing certain things. Like a prayer is 10 points. You do 5 of those a day, that's 50 points. If you do this in a mosque, it's 100. And if you do it in the Mosque of the Prophet, it's 2,500, and so on and so forth. So you get different points for different things that you are doing. And if they are good, I don't know how you determine that they are good. I mean, is raping a slave girl that is married a good deed? I don't know. Anyway, you get 10 points for that instead of just 1. 161 says, my Lord guided me. I don't know why it would have to say so, but that's the way it is. And he gets my all. There's no partners. Very important. I mean, there are no other gods except me, but don't take partner other gods that don't exist. And then 164, God is all there is, so why look for others? Everyone for himself, no scapegoats. You'll end up before Allah, and he'll tell you where you were wrong, especially when you were debating. And 165, this is the closing of chapter 6. You are the best, in other words, Muslims, but you will be tested. And he is quick to punish, but forgiving and merciful. Okay, people tell me, show me one contradiction in the Quran. Well, here's a sentence, chapter 6, number 165. He is quick to punish, but forgiving and merciful. That's a contradiction. So, there you go. This is the Quran chapter 6. We have now finished. We're going to continue with chapter 7. And people have asked me, how long do you think before you're going to finish this? I don't know. I really don't know. So, does it matter? No, not really. We're just going to continue, and people can't tell us we're not reading the Quran. We're not in any way, ignoring it or anything like that. No, we are doing our best to read the Quran, to understand it. And if the Quran doesn't make itself understood, well, then I'm terribly sorry, it's not our fault. We're really doing our best to try and understand it. Okay, any questions, any comments? I have not been reading the comments now because I've been concentrating on the Quran. Hello, wonderful people in the chat. Is there anything happening in the chat? No, I see you're comfortable, you're just chatting, okay. Then, Mr. Moosestaffahh, it is down to you. Welcome to the Jinn and Tonic Show. Welcome, and I'm extremely happy that you chose this topic, because this is really, really rare that we get anything like this. So I'm really looking forward to this. Let's all have fun and hear what you have to say. Go for it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Can everybody hear me? perfectly?
Perfectly.
Perfectly. Okay, awesome. So what we're gonna cover today is, the overview of the Shia doctrine itself, and mainly my focus today will be the 12-er Shia doctrine. So sure, there's other sects of Shiaism, that Ismaili, Alawi, but my focus will mainly be 12-er. I will briefly discuss the other sects as well, and how and then I'll also discuss as the extinct sects within Shia Islam as well, the conceptual findings, like what was the historical finding, the mindset behind it, also like Muhammad's ties to these findings. When did the split really happen? So this is the meat of it. When did the split happen? There's a lot of back and forth. There's different theories on how the split happened, actually, and we're going to clear some misunderstandings. We'll also briefly touch on the Shia hadiths as well as the dating on when they were authored. Then we'll also look at different biographies, which biographer or historian was sympathetic to the Shia cause, and which one was, you could say, anti-Shia or had a little more of a Sunni color to their reporting. Then we'll look at Ali, like how Ali's life, the historical events in Ali's life, and then we'll also look at the Shia view on Aisha, which is not discussed a lot. We all know Aisha as being the 9-year-old being screwed by Muhammad, but realistically, we've never heard the Shia opinion of this. And then we'll also see Muawiyah and Hassan's agreement. That is, that Muawiyah and Hassan had a written agreement. Then we have the Battle of Karbala, which was one of the defining moments into which eventually led to the separation, one of the understood events, that is. And then we will also look into the, and I won't go too long, the also some of the earlier events that may have influenced the what do you call it, the theolizing. It's like deifying like Hussein and Karbala. We will also look at an earlier legend, which was a Christian legend, which also had a similar scenario from the 4th century. Then we will look into modern influences on Shia Islam, which date back to the 16 and 1700s, the Safavid Empire. And I'll even briefly discuss Dr. Ali Shariati, but if we have time, that is. But he's also an interesting chap. I used to follow his philosophy before I became a kafir. But I was already a kafir, technically speaking, because being a Shia is equivalent to a kafir. So not much has changed for me. So if we understand that Islam has 5, pillars, correct? So in Shia Islam, this gets a little more complicated because there are primary pillars and then there are secondary pillars. So 5 primary pillars of Shia 12-er doctrine, I'm just saying 12-er doctrine, are Tawheed, which is the oneness of God. That's number 1. Number 2, we have Adl, or justice. There's a lot of word justice is like, it's one of those, equal distribution of wealth type of justice. So this is the kind of justice that they, focus on. Nabuwat, which is prophethood. Imamat, which is the rightful imams, who are the successors of the prophet. And Qayamat, which is the judgment day. So these are the 5 core beliefs or core primary pillars. Then we have the 8 secondary pillars, we call them. So these include prayer, fasting, Hajj, Zakat, Amar bin Maruf, Nahin al Munkar, and Khums. So what is an Amar bin Maruf? Amar bin Maruf is basically enjoining the good or enjoining in good deeds. Nahin al Munkar means forbidding evil. And Khums is actually an additional, like we have the Zakat, but Khums is more of an additional contribution, which is 20% of your yearly savings. Now, Khums eventually was, I believe it was a later addition, but keep in mind, I haven't found the source for this yet, so I really apologize for that. But I will definitely try to find information on that. So now we briefly, like I mentioned before, there's the Jafri sect, the Ismaili sect, and the Alawi sect. Those are the sects that we see today. Now, however, there's a few extinct sects as well, and I'll name a few. that are very interesting, actually, because keep in mind, it's very similar to the rise of Christianity as well, like the rise of Shia Islam. It's very similar. It's that it wasn't just like an idea that was just one idea, but it was a supernova of different ideologies. And for at least 200, 300 years, many people weren't on the same page. So one of the extinct sects include the Bazgiya sect. This sect believed Jafar al-Sadiq, who was the sixth Imam, or the great grandson of Muhammad, Jafar al-Sadiq, he was God. That's what the belief was of the Bazgiya Shia sect. Then we have the Dhammiya Shia sect, which stated that Ali was God and Muhammad was the messenger. So this is definitely an interesting idea. The most well-known in history is the Kesanite sect, which, again, it was the Mukhtar's. These embodied Mukhtar's supporters. They formed during the Second Islamic Civil War, and they believed Muhammad bin al-Hanafiya was the promised Mahdi or savior. Then we have Ghurabiya sect, which believed that Angel Gabriel was mistaken and that revelation of prophethood should have come to Ali bin Abu Talib, not Muhammad. And then there's the Ravindis sect, which believed that the spirit of Jesus was inside Ali bin Abu Talib. So I feel like this could be some interesting information. Do you fellows, do you have any questions about this information?
No, there's... Okay, most epic Black Star says that there was a division over Fatima's claim.
There was.
Then the Day of Judgment, the Nikah sex, then can we please skip to the Aisha story? Did she post Muhammad with the Jewish?
Okay, we want to skip to the Aisha story. I can definitely do that. So keep in mind, we all know that Aisha was the, Muhammad's favorite wife. Apparently in Shia Islam, that wasn't the case. So, and this was a story that I've had like an atheist and even a Sunni Muslim approaching back when I was Shia, and I insulted Aisha, and they're like, "What?" They were very surprised that I called her a bitch. So the reason I did that was because there's this belief that the Aisha is actually hated because not only is she the daughter of Abu Bakr, who usurped Ali's right, but also she was the one who waged war against Ali and demanded that Ali should send the killers of Usman, to arrest the killers of Usman, that is. Her hate for Ali, which was formed when Ali was the one who advised Muhammad to divorce her because she was accused of adultery. So if you recall the Quran verse, that is where Aisha is excused and there's no accusation of adultery. So and what's interesting is that there's the story where in I think chapter 66 where it said that Muhammad slept with I think someone else, and then Hafsa told Aisha, and then that caused a little bit of a drama. I think 66 between 1 to 5. Now the Shia version.
Yeah, but the women are so ungrateful.
Yeah, the women are so ungrateful. So now the Shia version is actually a little different in the sense that Muhammad actually stated the secret that I will declare Ali as my successor, and Aisha spilled the beans. That he was supposed to reveal it in public, but then she spilled the beans too soon. And Muhammad was mad at her and Quran verses came. So this is the Shia. Some Shia scholars believe that this is the interpretation of the story. That is, like, she was not only a disobedient wife, she didn't do her wifely duties, and also the fact that she hated Ali's guts, and she waged war against Ali. This was the Battle of Jamal or Basra, that was fought in Basra during the first ever Islamic civil war. So during that battle, Aisha was atop a camel, and her troops they surrounded her. So and I am saying this from purely a Shia narration. So what happened was that this was a very tough battle. So Ali told his son Hassan, the elder one, not Hussein. Hassan is the elder son. So the elder son was told, cut off the legs of the camel, and we will be able to take advantage. So Hassan rode, swiped the feet of the camel. It fell. She fell, and the crowd dispersed. They're like, "Oh no, what's happening?" And then if there was chaos that ensued. Muhammad bin Abu Bakr was told to fetch Aisha and bring her to Ali. So Muhammad bin Abu Bakr, during the ensuing mess, he grabbed Aisha. Aisha's like, who dares touch the harem of Muhammad? And he responded by saying, it is the man who is closest to you in blood, but also your worst enemy. And she recognized it's her brother, Muhammad bin Abu Bakr. So she agreed, and she was brought before Ali. She was offered that, listen, we have to stop the fighting. She refused. She refused to to withdraw from fighting, because the battle at this point was at a standstill. Then Ali told Hassan that he told something to Hassan, and then when Hassan said something to Aisha, and at this time Aisha is like combing her hair. So this she when she heard this, she was shocked. She left her hair half done. She packed everything up, and let's head back. So the ladies asked, what did this young man say? So she told them that Ali was given the right to divorce his wives even after his death. Now, what's funny, like you remember the Quran verse where the mothers of the believers cannot marry anyone else after Muhammad. So Ali had the right to divorce them. Aisha wanted to use this as a political tool. So the Shia see Aisha as like, she's usurping, she's kind of like misusing that title of mother of the believers. And they also feel that definitely Talha and Aisha there was something going on between them. Like whatever they did, they were up to some, funny business, that is. So this is the Aisha story, that is. Then we have, this comes from the life of Ali, basically. So does anyone have any questions about this, the Aisha event?
No, this was fine. I mean, this was just a short interlude. Mm-hmm. I think the main story should be around what actually happened in history, not going into all the details, but just giving an outline into what has happened, when and how, and through whom. Because a lot of people, I mean, we've spoken about the Umayyad, so people know the name Muawiyah, the first Umayyad caliph, but nothing that goes on along the lines of the Shias.
Okay, so what we can look into is towards the Battle of Siffin, that is. This was the battle fought between Muawiyah and Ali's forces, that is, and this was fought somewhere in Syria. So the background was that Muawiyah refused to step down as governor of Syria. And
sorry, Mustafa, we have to say this is 20 years after Muhammad has died, all right? This is a long time later. We have
around,
just to make this clear.
658. Actually, make this 660, 30 years after, almost 30 years have passed since Muhammad passed away. So this was the Battle of Siffin that takes place in Syria. And the misconception is that Muawiyah was victorious in the battle. No. Ali was nearly about to crush Muawiyah. So Muawiyah resorted to this trick in which he put passages of the Quran that was compiled during the time of Usman. He put passages of the Quran on spears, like he ordered that, and they raised that as sort of a surrender. So then they went into arbitration. Arbitration failed between Musa Ash'ari and Amr bin As, because Amr bin As refused to, there was the agreement that, we'll get rid of both Muawiyah and Ali from caliphate. But Amr bin As revoked his statement, and he said that, no, I want to keep Muawiyah as still as caliph. So that's where it failed. Then, Ali...
Is that the same Amr that was later sent to Egypt?
Yes, this is the same Amr. This is the same Amr bin As. So Amr really wanted to keep Muawiyah in power, and Amr was sent to Egypt. Ali, on the other hand, had sent Muhammad bin Abu Bakr to Egypt to secure Egypt because Muawiyah had taken that territory. So Ali sent Muhammad bin Abu Bakr. Muhammad bin Abu Bakr gets killed in a skirmish. Then you have Malik-e-Ashtar. Malik-e-Ashtar being another of Ali's companions. And Muawiyah had plotted to also have Malik-e-Ashtar killed on the way to Egypt, because Malik-e-Ashtar was ordered. There's an entire letter that Ali had sent Malik-e-Ashtar to actually go to Egypt and implement, the rule of the caliph. So, however, Ali's assassination wasn't necessarily at the hand of Muawiyah. It was actually at the hand of, Ibn Muljim. Ibn Muljim was one of the ones who battled Ali in Nehrawan, because this is the party that deviated from Siffin. So they fought a battle in Nehrawan, and in Nehrawan there was I think the Kharij, the Kharij, that is. So the Kharij were heavily defeated in Nehrawan, and this was one of the Kharij that actually assassinated Ali with the poisonous sword, and he struck him on the head in doing Fajr prayer. So this is when this happens. Hassan is elected, as caliph. That is, Hassan is Ali's elder son, who takes over as caliph. Now, there's Muawiyah has half of the empire, and then Hassan has half of the empire. So this is where you have Muawiyah and Hassan come up with an agreement, because Hassan realized that he's not as powerful as Muawiyah. Muawiyah has him cornered, basically. Ali at that time had more support than Hassan, so Hassan was surrounded. So there was a peace treaty between Hassan and Muawiyah. So I have the conditions of the peace treaty as follows. So number one, Hassan would hand over the rule of government to Muawiyah, provided he acts according to the Holy Book of God and the Sunnah of Muhammad and the character of the pious and virtuous caliphs. So he's referencing to the first four caliphs. So he has to abide by those laws. The second, Muawiyah does not have the right to nominate anyone after him. And the rule would be handed back to Hassan should Muawiyah step down or pass away. And the life and honor of the general public, whether they are they are black, white, or red, they even use the word red for Persian, that is, belonging to Syria, Iraq, Thihama, Hejaz, and whichever area would be safeguarded. The fourth is the life and property and honor of the Shias of Imam Ali. So they use the term Shias of Imam Ali. The Shia term means follower of friends of Ali, that is, and their family members. So this is not the religion itself, but the friends of Ali and their family members will be protected. And Muawiyah bin Abu Sufyan is bound by the covenant of Almighty God in this respect, and he will honor this covenant. Then you have the fifth term, which says Muawiyah will not open or secret any action against Imam Hassan bin Ali or against the Ahl al-Bayt, which is the people of the house, or Muhammad's family is also called Ahl al-Bayt, Ahl al-Bayt of Muhammad, that is. So Imam Ali will be remembered with honor and dignity, and he will not be reviled. According to some narrations, there will be no abusive language. Then the seventh agreement would be the Muawiyah will hand over Baitul Mal of Kufa and revenue of Darab Garth to Imam Hassan so that he may meet his expenses and say for the same and may repay the debt and other dues. So this was these were the terms and conditions of the agreement between Hassan and Muawiyah. Now, Muawiyah didn't like this agreement, that is. And what he did was that he had Imam Hassan assassinated through his wife, where there was poison in his milk. There was poison there, and he was poisoned. and Imam Hassan died due to the poison. So Muawiyah was able to take over as caliph, like absolutely no opposition whatsoever. So before the Battle of Karbala, that is, and this is the time 680. So this is the date 680. That is, this is almost 50 years after Muhammad. So Yazid, the son of Muawiyah, receives a letter of his father's critical condition, and it documents and then when he goes to Muawiyah, his father. So this is what Muawiyah says: "My dear son, I have spared you the trouble of traveling and going one place to another. I have prepared the grounds for you. I have humbled the enemies for you. I have subjugated the Arabs for you, and I have produced a consensus in favor of you. I have no fear anyone will contend with you in this matter, which has already been settled in your favor, except 4 people from the Quraysh: Hussein bin Ali, Abdullah bin Umar, Abdullah bin Zubair, Ibn Zubair, and Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr." So that's the younger son of Ali, the son of Umar, Ibn Zubair, and the son of Abu Bakr, one of the sons of Abu Bakr. And then he talks about each man. He says, with regards to Abdullah bin Umar, he's a man exhausted by excessive devotion. If then remained none other than him, he would pay you allegiance. But then Muawiyah talks about Hussein. He says, as for Hussein bin Ali, the people of Iraq will never leave him until they cause him to rise. If he were to rise against you and you were to gain victory over him, then you should pardon him, for he belongs to an important family, the Banu Hashim, and has a great right. Then he says, regarding Abdul Rahman bin Abu Bakr, he's a kind person who will follow whatever his companions will do. His only concern is women and sport. But then the final person he talks about is Ibn Zubair. He says, this one, the one who will crouch the crouching of a lion in wait of its prey, and constantly engage in trickery like a fox, and pounce when the opportunity presents itself, is Ibn Zubair. If he does that with you, tear him to pieces. So,
is there any kind of reference for this? Because Muawiyah, after all, is the first person who has some of the stuff actually documented. Some of the stuff is actually, found in the texts, where all the rest before that, this is all hearsay. Now, is this letter something that actually exists? Is it extant, or is this just hearsay as well?
So what I have is the document. This was the event documented by Ibn Mikhnaf. Now, Ibn Mikhnaf was the one who reported the events before and the events during and after the Battle of Karbala. And so he is the main person. Sure, he was born in 709. That is, this is the man he was born in 709. And as of now, most of his works were destroyed. As of now, with the scholars, that is, we have a reconstruction of the different manuscripts that were lost. And these manuscripts are from Tabari, actually. Tabari uses Abu Mikhnaf to report events as well. Abu Mikhnaf is one of his sources. So
as a cross-reference, you mean?
As a cross-reference. So Tabari, so we used mainly Tabari's reference of Abu Mikhnaf to reconstruct this event. And whatever I've said to you is from Abu Mikhnaf's account. And also,
okay, so all right. So this is hearsay, but we don't have any of these manuscripts. We don't have these letters. We don't have any of these texts. So it could be embellished. It could be,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the references, however, what we've done is we have a list of the references that Abu Mikhnaf used. So far, what we know, that is, and this is from Tabari as well, like Tabari's reference of.
Yeah, but then that's later.
Yes. So the references Abu Mikhnaf used, that is, are as follows. Let me just find. He made a list of isnads, that is. Call it.
Because my problem is always to, where does it start getting real? Where do we have the real text, where we have real documented history, and which is wishful thinking and embellished modification of some stories? This is always very different or very difficult in that era to distinguish the one from the other.
Absolutely. Now, I'll list you the narrators, that is, of Abu Mikhnaf's documentation, that is. The first list of narrators include those who directly witnessed the battle. However, there are only 3 people who he has in those who witnessed it. The second list of people, they are those who witnessed the battle, but from Mikhnaf, they use 1 or 2 links. That is, there's like, oh, I told this person and this person then told me. So this is, or somewhere around, like there's 2 people in that chain, that is. The third list includes those who were in direct contact with the events before and after of the events, but not the event itself, the event of Karbala itself, not the event itself. And there are only 5 people, whereas in the second list, there are 15 people. Then we have the fourth list, which is the events before and after Karbala, but narrated to 1 or 2 links. Like this is people who witnessed the event before, after. However, this is not them directly, but they have 1 or 2 links between them. And there are 21 people on this list. Then the fifth list is people who were neither witnesses nor were they in direct contact with the events. However, they were reporting the events. And there are 29 of these people. So the majority is from this list, which is 29 people. The sixth list, however, is just narrators who were either companions of the Aima. Aima is the term used for Ahl al-Bayt or the Muhammad's family, or Muhammad's family themselves. However, there's still like, with Muhammad's family at least, these are the later members of Muhammad's family, which start from Muhammad bin, we call it Zain al-Abidin, then Muhammad Baqir, and Jafar al-Sadiq, that is. There are only 14 people on this particular list, that is. So this is how the event was documented. However, there's an excerpt that does say to be careful, or we always have to be very careful. There's some final remarks that we have come to end of reports which have appeared in Tarikh al-Tabari on the authority of Hisham al-Qalbi from Abu Mikhnaf. So these are the 2 chains, that is. And then we use Abu Mikhnaf's chain as well. So this is how the event was. And we've only recently, unfortunately, which is very unfortunate, recently reconstructed these events through Tabari, that is. So, which is the unfortunate scenario.
Yeah, okay, but the thing is that if you have a battle, for example, and people say, well, it was in this region, in this area, then normally if these events really happened, like in Europe, or Napoleon, when he went all the way east, you could actually, you can reconstruct this based on the findings that you have in the ground, where you do have pieces of metal, where you have swords, where you have arrows, where you have all, but none of that has happened. None of these things were found in anything before this 8th, 9th century even. So all these things are like, a little bit dubious. So I'm always taking this with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Abu Mikhnaf, the one who first reported these events, he lived between 709 and 774. The battle took place in 680. So at latest, he's reported it around the 770s.
There's another 2 generations in between, exactly, yeah.
90 years removed for the very, very latest, that is. And another misconception is, one interesting fact I'll actually tell you about is Karbala, the name Karbala itself. The original name for the area was Kurbabal. Kurbabal was an area of villages, that is, up along the bank of the Euphrates. Karbala, the name itself, was a misspelling of that name. And then it became the name of the city eventually. So Karbala was eventually a misspelling of Kurbabal. So, and also, there's also still debate on how many members of, how many fighters were there on Hussein's side. There was no doubt that the Syrian and the Iraqis from Yazid's side had a large army, but then the reports go as as low, like the agreed number is 72 amongst the Shia community. They will tell you 72. Now, reports say a different story altogether. So the reports say they range from 145 to 600. And the names are of 104 people. So we're not even sure how many people were there during that battle, that is. But this is the range that we have, is at least 32 horsemen are discussed in the event, 32 horsemen up to 600 people. So this is where, you know, it kind of, and this is from Abu Mikhnaf, is that, and also Muhammad Baqir reports that there were 145 people on Hussein's side. Sure, it was a one-sided battle, but basically there's no consensus on what is the agreed number, and even amongst the Shia scholars, that is. So that is, and I'm trying to be as honest as possible with history, because keep in mind, these events were reported a lot later, and many different authors have had different influences, that is. I'll even give you an example of I was going through the authors of even Muhammad's biography and those who reported these events, that is, and we have, we have 3 classical scholars who were sympathetic to the Shia, and 3 classical scholars who were sympathetic to or at least reported the events in a Sunni color, that is. So everybody knows Ibn Ishaq, correct? Like the first ever biographer of Muhammad's life.
Well, yeah, from hearsay.
Yeah, from hearsay, that is, of course. What's reported is that he was a student of Al-Zuhri, that is. And for him, and this is what I got from the the origins and development of Shia Islam, that is. So his account is very straightforward on how Abu Bakr and Umar gained control. His writings, however, had political influence of Mansur. Mansur was tied, his ancestral lineage through his narrations were tied to Ibn Abbas. And that's where they became the Abbasis. And this was to justify Mansur's rule. What is surprising is that Ibn Ishaq is somewhat also sympathetic to the Shia, because he reports the Saqifa event where Umar and Abu Bakr conspired to usurp Ali's right. He also placed Muhammad's birth year in the year 570. He placed it as an estimate. So it's, and he also placed the estimate of his death too.
But was it you who, because I found it very interesting that there is an opinion that it was actually the Shias who were the true Muslims, and that then the Sunnis were the ones who split off, and then just through the power itself, the Shia power, managed to go through and become the majority.
Absolutely. Okay. So I'll tell you the split that really happened. And this is a very recent, I was telling you that, and this was a recent discovery. I was in the library of my university.
Because I found this fascinating, because nobody's ever come this way around, that's why.
So keep in mind that the Sunni caliph in Sunni concept was a political authority, whereas the Shia Imam was a religious authority. And the Shia are reported to have more revolts against both the Umayyads and the Abbasids, because they existed to depose the caliph. And they wanted the caliphate to be replaced by their imam. So we have the 12 imams. Now, there's a popular misconception is that Sunnism is the original version of Islam, and that the Shia deviated, that is. In the beginning, however, the opponents of Shia were not the Sunni, but were adherents to what we would term Umayyad Islam. Sunni Islam emerged as sort of a compromise position between these two schools of thought. You see, the Umayyads revered the first 3 caliphs, which is Abu Bakr, Umar, and Usman. They revered, the Shia hated the first 3, but revered Ali, whereas the Umayyads hated Ali. So the Sunni Islam then emerged and calls the first 4 the rightly guided, or the Khilafat al-Rashidun. And this emerged as sort of to reconcile the two positions, that is. And I was even looking into like Robert Hoyland, and he states that, again, according to his estimate, is that the Sunni Islam properly emerged after the death of the 11th Imam, Imam Hassan al-Askari. So Hassan al-Askari is the 11th Imam. He's supposed to have the son who's the Mahdi, that is the savior. Now, he had no heir.
But he's the one who's missing still, right?
He's the one who's still missing. The Mahdi is missing. So the Mahdi was never, there's no report of the Mahdi being alive. He left no heir. So that's where some people split off, into Sunni Islam, that is. Whereas there's a minority that clung on to the hope of the Mahdi, that is. So the Mahdi was the thing that the belief that's the Shia Muslims still hold on to. Whereas the Sunni Muslims, they do have hadith reporting about the Mahdi, but they kind of feel that it's not the same as the 12th Imam, that is. So, and if you also notice, the difference between, the Shia and Sunni Sunni Islam is that Sunni Islam, if you've noticed, their writings will tend to sugarcoat a lot of things, especially about Muhammad, even though as recently they haven't exactly sugarcoated them. Like, at least with modern scholars, they try to sugarcoat them. But Shia Muslims will not, even though they will kind of exaggerate the horrible things, but they will not hold back on the dark side of history. They will admit fully to you that these terrible things happened. So with Shia Muslims, it's a lot easier to come into terms with some of the fishy hadiths too, because with Shia, they can kind of reject the hadiths from Bukhari and Muslim because, because they have that option at least. They also will use those hadiths based on just to prove a point or a historical event. So here's some Shia hadiths that a lot of people don't know about is Shia hadiths. The first ever one, and even some Shia don't know about this, is Sulaim bin Qais. Sulaim bin Qais, some reports have said this is as early as 695, but the report itself is in the final years of Hisham bin Abdul Malik, the book that is, the manuscript, is from 724 to 743. Again, supposedly the manuscript is from...
how do you pronounce this name? Is it Qais?
No. Qays.
Yes. Qais, okay.
Yeah. Sulaim bin Qais, he's the one who reported the writer of this hadith book, which I actually have here. I definitely highly recommend this. I highly recommend this hadith book. That is, if you manage to get a hold of it, there's some excellent material in there. Then you have the second, which is considered authentic in Shia, is Al-Qafi. Al-Qafi is not only reporting the sayings of Muhammad, but also the sayings of the Imams. So Al-Qafi was authored between around 864 to 941. That's the range we have with Al-Qafi. So this comes more than a century after Sulaim bin Qais. And then we have the third, which we have the, Al-Istibsar, which is the third hadith book. This was authored roughly in the 1000s, that is, and this was during the end of the Abbasid era, that is. This was authored by Sheikh Tusi, that is. And then we have the Wasail Shia and Biharul Anwar, the most recent one, the most new and improved, from Allama Majlisi. And Allama Majlisi authored this hadith book between 1677 and 1697. And Allama Majlisi resided in Safavid Iran. And this was the era where Safavid, the Safavid rulers were really, really pushing for Shia Islam to spread. So this is the time where Allama Majlisi was also compiling as many hadiths as possible, according to Shia narrations, that is. So these, and we also have the Najul Balagha as well, which are the sermons and lectures of Ali, around 1900s and 1000. That's where even that is, it's a compilation of Ali saying that is, that's even 300 years removed. So so these are what I've stated, the Shia hadith, that is the dating of the Shia hadith. So as I was also, there's I mentioned earlier that there's the Shia believe that Ghadir Kum was the story where Muhammad declares Ali his successor. It's not reported in Ibn Ishaq or Ibn Hisham. However, it's reported in Al-Yaqubi. Now, Al-Yaqubi died around 897, 898. And the story of Ghadir Kum was reported in his writings. He's the first one to report these. And he's the, yeah.
What? But that's 200 years later now.
Exactly. So basically, Al-Yaqubi reports the Ghadir Kum story. So that's why Ghadir Kum seems a little, okay, there's something weird about that. And even Masudi, who's also a Shia sympathizer, writes his story in the 900s as well. He's between 896 to 956. So we'll say way into the 10th century, that is. The first author, however, to report events in the Sunni color, that is Ibn Sa'd. Ibn Sa'd, he is the one who boosted in response a Abu Bakr's character. He gave him the title of like Siddiq. Abu Bakr was so special. So he was around the 830s, 840s. Ibn Sa'd was the one who boosted Abu Bakr's importance, that is. So he gives a Sunni.
Do we have this text, or is this also just Ibn
Sa'd is the author. He also wrote a biography of Muhammad. So
yeah, but we don't have this.
We don't have
the question is. The question is, do we have any text by Ibn Ishaq saying exactly this? Or is this also somebody else who is commenting that Ishaq said
Oh, no, I'm talking about Ibn Sa'd, not Ibn Ishaq, sorry. Ibn Sa'd. This is a different writer.
Ah, sorry, my mistake.
Ibn Sa'd, however, we kind of know Ibn Sa'd's story. He's the one who came up with the Abu Bakr Siddiq title.
Ah, okay, then I got it wrong, but it's the same time period.
It's around 840s, that is?
No, then it's 200 years later. No,
that's 210 meters as well. And Baladuri is another author who reports in the Sunni color. He died around in the 890s, that is. Then we have Tabari. Now, what's funny is that, and this is kind of what I've heard recently, is that Tabari is also, even though he puts a Sunni color, he's branded as a Shia sympathizer for some odd reason. And this is kind of what I found very interesting. So far it's hearsay, but I've only heard that he's called a Shia sympathizer, but I've read his work. He's only reporting history.
What about the texts where they say, well, they have been ascribed to him, but they're not really? Because there's a lot of reassignment going on.
With Tabari?
With Tabari.
Yeah, that I won't be able to answer. That I am not aware of, that is, because I haven't dived too deep into Tabari, like reassigning what he said and what he didn't say.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't have the answer, but I will try to research this, that is. So that is the unfortunate circumstance that we have.
Wow. Okay, let's just take a quick break, because now it's getting like a shooter. We've had 1 hour now almost of just boom, boom, boom. So there's a lot of stuff. So if I can, okay, let me see if I can just sort of give you this in a nutshell. What has happened is we don't really know anything of what you have just said. All of this is speculative. All of this is what people have said about this. This is as good as it gets, with regards to not having anything written down without having anything documented. So what we think what happened is that people somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula came up with something where the first real happenings we see happening in Syria, in Damascus, and in Persia, and what today is actually Iraq. There we had the clash between two different groups, which led to some battles where some people were killed, which at the end of the day had both of them surviving, but both of them then in competing, let's say, ideologies which have the same foundation, because both go back to the same basic understanding of monotheism. And the rest is then the implementation in the real world where they were fighting each other, but we don't know the details. Is that this in a nutshell?
That's this in a nutshell. And what I would add is that the Shia-Sunni conflict, that reached its height reportedly as early as the Safavid and Ottoman Bible times. So, we call it the first Safavid emperor. He really wanted to give Iran, at that time Iran and Iraq, and Azerbaijan itself, he really wanted to give Iran a, a unique identity, that is. And it gave, in opposition to both Uzbeks as well as the Ottomans, the Sunni Ottomans, that is. And there were some very harsh policies, anti-Sunni policies in Iran, which eventually got softened up by the introduction of Muhammad Baqir Majlisi. However, there's, this was 12th Shiaism really spread because of the Safavid dynasty, and the Safavid were in constant conflict with the Ottomans. So that was where things got really heated up, and and that's how we see the effects of it still to this day. That is, like, we have the Saudi Arabia, the Turkish Sunni bloc on one side, then we have the Iraq, Iran, Shia.
Yeah. And is this something that historically was reflected in the different versions of the hadith and the sayings that were attributed to the people? Or was this totally separate?
Could you rephrase that question?
If I look at the Sunni hadiths, the traditional six Sahih, or whatever you want to call them, all these different sayings that were attributed to Muhammad, and then you see the competing versions on the Shia side, was this like a rap battle between the two sides, or did they develop totally separate? Was there any kind of interaction where the two were competing, that the one said, well, this is our version, and the other said, no, you're wrong, and blah, blah, blah? Or is this like a totally separate split development?
It's a totally separate split development, because some Shia do rely on, some of Bukhari's work as well. And it's a bit more complicated than, this is a rap battle, that is, because because the Shia hadiths not only focus on Muhammad, but they also focus on the Imams as well. The 12 Imams are also very important. Whereas with the Sunni hadiths, they are only focused on Muhammad. So the Shia, how they're developing is that they're developing the story based from the perspective of, the Imams themselves. They do...
Yeah, but also on Hussein, isn't it?
On what?
On Hussein.
Yes, on Hussein, like the events of Hussein, Ali, Hassan, the Imams, the 12 Imams, like they kind of develop...
Okay, but isn't Hussein somebody who sticks out from the others?
Hussein is remembered mostly for what I stated earlier, the Battle of Karbala, that the area was...
Oh, okay, because I remember, because I lived in Tehran. Okay, so I remember that they were always screaming his name when they were going through the streets and blah blah on the celebrations. So he was venerated in Tehran, at least in the 70s.
He was venerated by Muhammad Allama Baqir Majlisi. So what Majlisi did, and I've written this down somewhere, just hang on. Okay, so what Majlisi did, he linked Imam Hussein's martyrdom at Karbala with the Imam's power to grant intercession to paradise to those who honor him through ritual commemoration. So the ritual commemoration is the chest beating, the self-flagellation, the...
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
The procession.
Just to feel the pain, yeah.
Yes, Majlisi promoted the veneration of Hussein and the other Imams by collecting traditions, mostly of Hussein, from which is the latest hadith out of between 1677 and 1697. He, along with the 12 Imams, he made also Muhammad and his daughter Fatima the Masum, or the infallibles, that is the 14 infallibles. So he gave them this the sinless the sinless status that they will be able to grant intercession to paradise. So that's what we have for why the commemoration is so heavy. There was still, however, the commemoration, the earliest report of the commemoration itself is from 10th century Baghdad, but it wasn't as big as how it got during the Safavid era. The Safavid era really made this mainstream.
Okay. Interesting question from the chat. How is it that the numbers varied so vastly? Was it more of a balance in the beginning between Shias and Sunnis? And when did the Sunnis get this momentum?
In terms of numbers of people?
Yes.
So in terms of number of people, so again, this is the earliest report is that during the time you have the Abbasids and then the Umayyads, they have a clear majority support. So they have a very clear majority support. And that's why the numbers are a lot bigger, because the Shia of Ali were under persecution throughout history, that is. And, because you're a minority and you're persecuted, heck, there's so many genocides of Shia, even to this day. So that's...
Wow. So this was military.
Military.
Shia military.
Yeah, Shia military, that a lot of Shias were massacred. Sure, the Shia of Safavid also did the same thing, but there's more from the Sunni side as well. And even the Masked Arab, who's a famous YouTuber, he actually also did a video on takfir and infighting, and he also reports the massacring of Shia Muslims and what ISIS. He compares it that the ISIS is just repeating what Sunni Islam is telling them to do, which is massacre the Shia because they are Rawafid or rejectionists, that they reject.
Okay, yeah.
So
the Shias are not as sensitive towards depictions of Muhammad, towards the strict adherence to the 5 prayers and things like that. And this is another question: do they also have like these symbol things, like the black stone and things like that? They don't go for these kind of I forgot the name now. Symbols of Islam, do they?
Yeah, they mainly go for the hand of Fatima. You've seen the hand of Fatima, like this hand.
Yes.
Yes. So, sure, it was initially a Persian symbol, but then it was kind of venerated into the hand of Fatima, that is. And that's where it got very popular. And they use more Persian symbols, because keep in mind, Shia Islam, modern Shia Islam, has been heavily influenced by the Persian of Iran Shahab.
Well, the Zoroastrians, yeah.
Yeah, and Zoroastrians. So there's more Iranian influence into Shia Islam compared to Sunni Islam, that is, at least with how we carry out traditions. And even a lot of Shias celebrate Nowruz, which is an Iranian festival. So, Nowruz is celebrated, and, even certain, attributes of older Iraqi legends were given to Hussein as well, which I really wanted to share today. Has anyone heard of the legend of Mar Kardagh?
No, I have not.
Really? You have not heard of this? Okay. So this is a legend. This took place in Iraq, this event, supposedly. This is a legend of an Assyrian prince who martyred because he converted to Christianity in the 4th century of the Safavid Empire. And he was rejected by his Zoroastrian family and his father especially. His father was supposedly Shapur II. And he rebelled against the Persian for months in the mountains somewhere in northern Iraq. So, but then Saint Stephen came to his dream, and he said that it's better to give your own life than to continue fighting. So he surrendered, and then he was punished by being stoned to death. However, this event itself, or this legend, is first reported during the final decades of the Sasanian Empire during 633 and 651. So there's a possibility that the Battle of Karbala had kind of some influence of Mar Kardagh as well. So there's a huge, very big possibility of these two linking together, or at least the veneration as such. That is, so the deifying of this. So that if what you call it, that's where I think this was yeah. So this is what I. Do you have any questions or comments?
Well, how come that the Shias have the same? Well, okay. On the one hand, they are very different in their approach towards relics, towards all sorts of things that the Sunnis find very important. Yet, on the other hand, if it comes to the rituals in Mecca, they do the same thing.
Absolutely.
How is that possible?
So keep in mind that at this moment with Mecca, is the Hajj is kind of, what do you call it? As I mentioned earlier, however, it's still a secondary pillar. It's not a primary pillar of Shia Islam, that is. It's a secondary one. Because for them, Hajj isn't as important as to, like I said last time, visit Imam Hussein's grave, that is. So you will see more Shia inclined to go to Imam Hussein's grave in Karbala and Ali's grave in Najaf than they would go to Saudi Arabia. There's a bigger inclination to go there. Sure, the rituals, like when they go to Hajj or Umrah, it's the same, because like that's where the foundation is of Mecca, that is. However, what's interesting is that the Shia are more open to the idea that Mecca may not have been the original starting place for Islam. Because what's funny is that, and again, this is a personal experience, a Shia friend actually told me of Dan Gibson's research. A Shia was the one who told me.
Okay.
There's a huge possibility this isn't even Mecca. And even the earlier, if you see the mosque surrounding Ali bin Abu Talib's grave, guess where that faces? It doesn't face Petra or Mecca. It faces Jerusalem.
I was just going to say either Jerusalem or there's another place which is further to the west, but I don't know if there's a name for this.
Yeah, I think he calls them either the unknowns or the in-between mosques, that is. In Dan Gibson's research, he calls them the in-between mosques, which is between Mecca and Petra, because this was during the time of confusion.
Yeah, there was a lot of confusion then.
Yes, and even I think, what do you call it? There was some qiblas, the unknown qiblas, which pointed to Masjid al-Kufa. Some of the I think this was the Qazimain Mosque, I believe. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure. There's one. I'll definitely get back to you on that one. But there was definitely a mosque which Shia consider very important that was pointing towards Masjid al-Kufa, and Masjid al-Kufa is all the way in Iraq.
Okay. Rob, questions, thunderous questions. Come on, why is it only me asking?
Well, that's because you've been asking the ones that we wanted to be asking ourselves. But the couple of questions I have in all of this, it seems very convoluted, very confusing. And I say that with the greatest respect, how Shiism has come about as a result of Muhammad's death. But as a former Shia yourself, as an ex-Sunni Muslim myself, the one thing I thought about in all of the history of Islam, why did Allah not have some kind of guidance as a foresight, seeing Allah is who knows all things, knowing that the greatest atrocity in Islam will be inflicted on Muslim violence since the death of Muhammad up until today? There are more Muslims that have killed Muslims, whatever brand of Islam you care to consider, than it has been non-Muslims killing Muslims. And yet that is not mentioned in the Hadith, and that is not mentioned in the Quran either. Why do you think that is?
I think this was during the time Ibn Taymiyyah kind of provoked this idea that, he, in his tafsir, actually, in his tafsir of the Quran, I believe there's a verse that says that, I think it was chapter 47 or something, that the believers are harsh to the disbelievers or something like that, right? There's a verse in the Quran. So Ibn Taymiyyah, or Shaykh al-Islam that we call him, was one of the earliest who kind of, said that these are Rawafids and they should be killed wherever you find them. So that's when he started tying Shia to what do you call it, to be killed. And the Quran is like justifying it. He used the Quran to justify it. So, yeah.
So when you consider, for instance, there are hadith that talk about towards the end of the period of time before Qiyamah, you have hadith that turn around and say, well, there's a Jew behind the stone, or there's a Jew behind this particular tree, come and kill him. That's the animosity and contempt that Sunni Muslim has for the Jew. It is the same kind of contempt and animosity that the Sunni Muslim has for the Shia as well. Yeah, but we do not find that kind of rhetoric in hadith or the Quran. What do you think to that?
Now, like, you mean to say, like, is there no direct reference to killing Jews and Christians?
Well, the thing is, you see, the contempt, one has to bear in mind that the Quran is in heaven. It has been in heaven with Allah. The argument is whether it's created or uncreated is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, even if it was in the mind of Allah, it is still present with Allah in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, the bloodshed, I can't reconcile how Allah, the all-knowing, cannot foresee the greatest bloodshed in human history as far as inter-religion violence is concerned.
Absolutely.
So when you have texts that are more proactive as far as enmity, animosity, hatred, and violence are towards non-Muslim, that is to say, Jew, Christian, and idolater. Yeah, but by implication, the Shia, as far as the Sunni is concerned, is also a non-Muslim. But the other three are mentioned by name, but the Shia isn't. I dare say through history, if you look at violence, say the Islam as Sunni Muslims have inflicted, they've probably inflicted more violence on the Shia Muslim than they have the Jew, or than they have the Christian, or than they have the Christian as a collective.
Yeah, no, I think.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry about that.
I'd say I don't know what your position is now. I'm going to assume from the dialogue that you're an ex-Shia Muslim now.
Shia Muslim, absolutely, yes. So,
did you not consider these thoughts when you was growing up as a Shia?
I was like, as growing up as a Shia, that is, basically, you really had to hold back on a lot of things, and I used to think that was unfair. Why is it that I have to hold back? And then there was the fear of your life, that is, because Pakistan has a blasphemy law, and the blasphemy law in Pakistan initially introduced to silence the Shia. That was the initial intention of the blasphemy law, because the Shia have a very different narrative, or at least they don't shy away from the narrative that said, when, for example, they will, at least Shia scholars will be a bit more honest with you. They'll say, like, for example, Muhammad killed, like, the Jews of Banu Qurayza, and the Shia will be like, yeah, that happened. And they will be more honest and upfront about it. Whereas the Sunni, in comparison, will try to, like, sugarcoat it a little, and even Aisha being 9 years old, the Shia will be like, yeah, that's a thing. There's nothing contradicting it. That happened. So they will not shy away from even the harsh stuff, that is. And yes?
You're finding Muslims now, particularly Sunni Muslims, are becoming more Quranist only. They're shying away from the hadith. They're moving away, possibly more likely because of the absolute ludicrous content of the hadith. Runaway stones, dipping flies, drinking camel urine, and such things. What I say to the Sunni Muslim, you can't say that, you can't reconcile that with at least 5 or 6, 7 ayah in the Quran that says that you have to listen to Muhammad, you have to follow his role model. That role model and that dialogue that Muhammad had is all found in the literature of the hadith. How does a Shia Muslim reconcile that they do not accept the hadith, yet the Quran is quite clear in several passages that the role model or the sayings or to listen to Muhammad the only source you can use is the hadith. How do you reconcile the non-use of the hadith then as a Shia?
As a Shia, that is, they can reject Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih al-Muslim, and these hadiths because they don't regard them as Sahih. They'll only use these hadiths, quote unquote, for, to, let's just say, for maybe historical research, that is, or at least, what to see what the Sunni authors have to say. So with Shia, I listed like the hadith, that is, the main one that's the foundation is Sulaim bin Qais, the earliest version. There's still debate among Shia, Sulaim bin Qais, but Sulaim bin Qais is a lot less, there's a lot less, weird. It's still weird in terms of like readability. It's horribly translated. Then we have the Nahj al-Balagha, which is of Imam Ali. And so they kind of venerate Ali, the Nahj al-Balagha, that is. And Ali, it's very vague. If you read the text of Nahj al-Balagha, it's extremely vague. Then in our last episode, when we discussed, was the Sahifa Sajjadiyah, which was supposedly authored by the fourth Imam, that is, Ali bin Hussein, or Zain al-Abidin. So that also itself is source. Then we have the Al-Qafi hadith from the Imams, as well as the the Bihar al-Anwa, which is the most recent one. And Bihar al-Anwa is one that's focused on the most because Baqir Madlisi, he's one of the biggest Shia authors and scholars. And also what's interesting is that Shia scholars such as Baqir Madlisi and Ibrahim al-Qummi, and there are a few Shia authors who agree, or at least hold the opinion, that the Quran itself was tampered with by human hand. They do hold that opinion, and it's and they do see that it's not perfectly preserved. They agree to that. Again, there's a long list of Shia scholars that actually agree with that. Modern Shias will try to kind of they're in a weird spot because there's the anti-Muslim bigotry on one side, then there's the accusation of Islamophobia, then you kind of have to try to fight both ends. You kind of tight roping, kind of pushing away both ends, right? So it's a very difficult position for a Shia to reconcile, the so-called Islamophobes are not necessarily wrong. And I felt that. I was like, the Islamophobes are not necessarily wrong. They're correct. They're kind of seeing Sunni Islam for what it is. But then we kind of got stuck into the spot where we're kind of labeled as the same. At least the Shia are labeled as the same as the Sunni. So that's where, it became a very unusual position for us. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, well, in your extension, I can see why it would make sense. I mean, the perspective I have is you have what I don't understand maybe in the Shia literature, because I know it's not there in the Sunni literature, that they would see it as more as a righteous act on their part because they would feel that Allah is acting through them. But sure, in any of the Shia literature, is there any writer that turns around and says, right after Muhammad dies, you have the start of all this bloodshed? And we're talking about all the big names in Islam involved in this bloodshed. You're talking about assassinations, you're talking about isolations. And yet, is there anything in the Shia literature that says, is this really what God wants? Is this the way? This is supposed to be a religion of peace. It's supposed to be the seal of the prophets. And all this prophet has done is create violence and schism. Surely, we never had this problem with the Jews. If you go by the narrative as an example, for the sake of expediency, that Allah sent 139,000 or 140, whatever it is, prophets. That in any of those religious texts previous, whenever their prophet died, wherever they were, whoever they were, there wasn't this schism that was left after the death. You don't find it in, say, Hinduism, Sikhism. You don't find it in, though I accept Sikhism is much later, 16th century. You don't find it in Christianity. You don't find it between Orthodox and non-Orthodox Jews. Yet you find it with Islam straight away.
Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, and again, I cannot answer the theological version of that question, like did God not foresee this, blah, blah, blah. I personally can't answer that because there's not much in Shia literature. However, in Shia literature, in the origins and development of Shia Islam, they state that the early Arabs, were not a homogeneous community. The seeds of the split were there even during Muhammad's time. Again, this is according to Shia research. The seeds of the split were between actually the northern Arabs and the southern Arabs. The northern Arabs being the Quraysh in Mecca and these tribes. That is funny they say northern because Mecca is south, but it's in the north. So clue there. So good job, Dan Gibson. But yeah, so there's the distinction between the north and the south. So the northern tribes usually elected someone to a political office by, what do you call it?
Do you think, just before we go, and I just want to ask before I forget the question, you're saying they're elected to office. Do you think that the influence was affluence for political office, not because of the further south you go, the more tribal you find people in that part of the peninsula? They were more tribal, they were more, if you like, interrelated through tribal customs and principles.
Yes.
Because somebody married to somebody married to somebody, so they had to keep the relationships tight in that kind of, if like, I don't want to use the word primitive, but cultural attitude as it prevailed there. Whereas the further north you go, the more affluent they were, so finances dictated the outcome as far as political policy was concerned.
Yes. Keep in mind the northern Arabs were not as religious. They weren't completely irreligious, but they were as religious as the south. The south was where the idea of Shia Islam actually emerged from. So if you notice, the Shia is a lot more spiritual. Like even during the pagan times, it is reported that a Medinian prince thanked the gods immediately when he got victorious from the battles, whereas the northern Meccans would be boastful more of their, the wealth, their beauty, as well as their ability to fight. So they were more earthly, whereas this community of the southern Arabs were a lot more, religious and a lot more like spiritual. They always believed that there was some unknown that is helping them, that is. And I think also, like, this was Medina, and the South Arabs were outside both the Lakhmid and the Ghassanid kingdoms, if you notice. So the Southern Arabs were a very, very different people. So they were not a homogenous community. So that's where the idea. Also, the Southern Arabs had the idea of hereditary, holy succession. That is, because your political office was never not only political, but it was religious, religious office as well. And that's where the concept comes in. Yeah.
That goes back to my point about when you're saying hereditary, that it would be passed on. It's all like a system of patriarchy from one generation to the next. Whereas further north you go, because of the affluence and influence of finance and commerce, that you find the political ideology where it is voted in, as it were, or via election. You say you're from Pakistan, are you, Moosestaffahh?
Yes, I am. I am from Pakistan. I currently reside in Canada, so don't worry, I'm not.
No. My family that are in Pakistan and moved to Canada as well. So, do you speak Urdu then?
I speak very good Urdu.
Oh, shabash beta, kya baat hai? Yeah, I lived in Pakistan for about 6 months myself, so in Lahore.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a few years ago now.
Did you ever visit Bibi Pak Daman by chance? Did you ever get the chance to do that?
No.
Okay, no. If you ever go there, it's definitely an area that I would recommend going. It's a Sufi shrine of, like, supposedly the wives of Hassan, Hussein, or their descendants, or their descendants kind of migrated to that part. Supposedly, I don't know how authentic that is. But
Moosestaffahh, do you know anything about the attitude of Shias? Like, what kind of an attitude do they have towards Sufis? What kind of attitude do they have towards Muhammad as such, to all these other things that are so important for Sunnis? Is that similar or different? What would you know about that? I mean, because I know that you're into the history. I don't know how much you know about the Shia internals.
Okay, no, the Shia are, at least with Sufi Muslims, they actually don't have anything against Sufi Muslims, that is. with the Shia against in regards to Muhammad, they kind of have this odd ideology where, sure, Muhammad was the prophet, but then there's more importance for Ali in comparison. That is, and which is kind of like where the difference occurs, and Ali being the quote unquote rightful heir. And Muhammad, they kind of see him as just the messenger, and like he brought the message, but then Ali is the more important figurehead in.
And the stories about Muhammad, how he tortured, how he beheaded, how he raped, how he, all these things, they don't care, or are those similar stories?
That's a very good question, actually. They're a very good question, actually. Some of the stories are similar. That is, the stories are similar. However, it's very difficult to say that. Yeah, like the stories are the same. I don't see any difference between Sunni and Shia narrations of Muhammad, at least about Muhammad, that is. And at the same time, they probably don't care as much, or they probably are not as aware as 99% of Muslims, that is. Around.
Yeah, well, I think the worst story ever is about Muhammad telling his men to enjoy raping female captives.
Yeah,
and this, I find that this the worst thing that you can say about a human being, and this is supposed to be the role model.
Yeah,
so I was wondering if the Shias have the same story.
Yeah. So now the Shia don't have like the same, like they don't have as brutal of a depiction of Muhammad compared to the Sunnis, at least. He's not, at least with the Shia narrations that I've seen, he's not very brutal. He's just a very strict monotheist. That's how they portray him as such.
Okay. The more idealistic, yeah.
And more idealistic portrayal of Muhammad. He was more of a general, more of a victorious over battle, and he was constantly like had Ali and by his side, and Hassan and Hussein. Like he would be more of a like. The more narrations about how he how he was with his family and how he would, there's more.
Okay, yeah.
Aspect of Muhammad than like the brutality, the brutal aspects where you see in the Sunni literature matters, whereas Muhammad is seen as more charity, as more charitable in comparison. Overall, as far as I've seen that, Muhammad is seen as more of a tutor, more what do you call it, a more idealized. He doesn't seem super perfect, but he's more ideal at least.
Okay.
In comparison.
What about stories? Because this is a question from the chat again, not from me. What about? Do you know anything about the stories, about the historical background? Do they also have stories that the women or families used to bury female babies?
Yeah, we do have those stories though in the Shia narrations as well, like burying the daughters alive, right? Now, as far as the written stuff goes, it's hard to find anything to back that up, because that one is, I feel, is pure hearsay, because it just there's the Meccans burying the daughters during Jahiliyyah. The Shia, at least the stories, the speeches do say that Muhammad ended that practice. We call it Muhammad was happy that Fatima, a daughter was born. That's what Shia narration says, that he was more blessed to have a daughter than he is to have a son. That's what certain Shia speakers I've heard of saying. Again, I'm saying speakers. I haven't read this particularly, so I'll be honest with you intellectually.
Okay, interesting. What is also interesting is as soon as I unmute my mic, it mutes yours for some odd reason. Really? I don't know how that works at the moment. It's as soon as I unmute my mic, yours is somehow softer than when I click on mute. So this is quite interesting. Rob, do you have any questions? Do you have anything of interest, or are you still on holiday? Are you?
I'm just listening in actually, so it's interesting because I haven't heard that much about that. So I'm just listening in.
Okay, is there anything else that you want to mention? Should we do something else? What does the chat say? Chat, come on. Did you write down, did you do as I told you and noted down your questions? There's going to be a test later on, remember? So is there anything that people want to know? Is that Sunni in Sunni or Shia in your house? Fatima wasn't his daughter. She was from a previous marriage. Fatima wasn't his daughter of
No,
Muhammad?
his daughter. She was from Khadija. She was his daughter from Khadija. Muhammad's daughter. Yeah.
She was the oldest daughter.
Yeah, she's the oldest daughter. Yeah.
One thing, Mustafa, growing up amongst the Muslim community, those Shia were the minority. I always found them to be very passive, very tolerant, nowhere anything like the Sunni Muslim, who are belligerent, argumentative, proactively violent and aggressive. But I never saw any evidence of that with the Shia Muslim. Now, bloodlines can be very similar, going through the two strains. What is the influence? Because as human beings, we're all the same. What do you think is the influence that drives the Sunni Muslim to be so proactively offended and belligerent and argumentative that we do not see this manifestation or these traits within Shia Muslims?
Yeah, so you won't see these traits in Shia Muslims only because of the fact that Ja'far al-Sadiq, the sixth Imam, that is, he kind of established, this is where we established Ja'fari Shia, right? Like Ja'fari, the 12 concept. So Ja'far actually stated that we should live as a minority. Like we should live like a minority. We should not pick any conflicts. We should not, we should live as a peaceful minority till the day of judgment, that is, or till the day the Mahdi arrives, that is. So, there's more of a passive, this sort of like a wait or there's a halt. Like we don't want to fight, that is. We will fight if we have to, but, that is the general, idea. That you should live like a community, that's because you will always be a minority.
Okay.
And it's also more of a safety reason too, more of a safety thing too, like you don't want to get too exposed. The only exception I found was, I think, Ruhollah Khomeini declaring a fatwa against Salman Rushdie. That's one history.
I was going to touch on that as my last point.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that there are many sects, even within the Shia community. There are many sects, but do they also accept that the Ayatollah Khomeini is their overarching Pope as such?
Oh no,
no, they don't. Okay,
no, because. For the Ayatollah Khomeini is only for 12 Shia. He's like Pope-like figure for the 12 Shias. The Agha Khan is the figurehead for the Ismaili Shia Muslims, that is, around the world. And the Alavid Shia have they have a complete, I'm not aware who their leader is currently speaking, I haven't kept up. And also with the Zaydi Shia are the fivers basically. And, they're also a very small number, but I'm not aware of, their politics either, because you see mostly 12 politics that influences, the world because of Iran, mainly.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
None that I can see at the moment. I don't think we're going to do a video today. I think we're going to stay with this topic because I think it's fascinating to get some insight, to have somebody here who actually knows some about this. Because as you can hear, I've got a very superficial understanding of the whole thing, and not to this level of detail. So, if you go back. Do you see my avatar? Why is it that Muslims automatically say that I am Ali? Why? What is it about this picture that people say? Now, I don't know where this comes from. This was given to me by somebody else from. This was copied from a game or something. Why is it that people say this is Ali?
This is the artistic depiction of Ali, actually. Like this one. It's a later artist of I think. Sorry, I'm just putting my charger in because my computer's about to die. Just give me a second. All right, there we go. It won't die. All right. So this is one of the more famous artistic depictions of Ali that you have, because I also had that impression too. And like Hussein has an artistic depiction as well. Oh wow, that changed to a blonde man. Ali was not a blonde.
No, I didn't mean to be a copycat. I didn't even know I had this picture on here.
Okay. So yeah, that is one of the bigger artistic expressions of Ali. I'll actually do like a little digging as to where it comes from, because that's how we used to depict Ali, especially in Najaf. And if you go to Karbala, you'll see the portrait of Hussein. Many people use that as a portrait of Muhammad, but actually that's the portrait of Hussein. And because he has like the smaller beard, the blood coming
This
down.
is Hussein. This is
No,
not the
No.
This is Ali.
Ali, your depiction is Ali, but there's another depiction that's used of Muhammad. I've seen floating around on the internet, but that's actually Hussein. Let me actually just find Hussein. So there's.
And this is more neutral, then I'll stick to this one.
So this one. Okay, no, I can't find it, but I'll definitely find that depiction somewhere, because it's giving me depictions of Saddam Hussein, apparently. I'm not looking for that. Oh dear. There's, Obama comes out of nowhere. But yeah,
No, don't worry about it. This was just a side issue. Interesting question from Krishna here, that the morning of Muharram, the Ashura, the Sunnis hate this. Why would you think this? Is this like a competitive? Well, I don't know. Is it a competition to Mecca or something? Or because I know that a lot of Shias go to different places, go to Karbala, go to other places, not only to Mecca. So is this seen as kind of a competition between the Sunnis and the Shias, that Ashura is a bigger festival in some places than Mecca is?
Yeah, and also I wouldn't even use it as a festival, more like a procession and morning ceremony, more than, and also like with Muharram, as well as the other places like the Roza, the shrines of Hussein. You have the shrine of Abbas, who was one of the sons of Ali. You have the shrine of the Imams, that is, especially Imam Raza in Iran. That's a very famous one in Mashhad, always crowded all year round. And there's what do you call it? The Shia Muslims are more like, they're more inclined to go to those areas compared to Mecca. Also because, there's the Saudi Wahhabi government that actually actively tries to prevent Shia Muslims from coming to.
Yeah, of course, they've got the clamp on this. Yeah,
and my uncle, who's a Shia Muslim, had to change he had to say that he was a Sunni just so he can get a work permit, because he wanted to work for his company in Saudi Arabia on a project, and he was denied a visa, so he had to change it to being a Sunni Muslim.
That's interesting. Yeah. And now, Alpha Omega, I'll get to your question just now, but I want to mention this because a lot of people have a misconception about taqiyya. Because the original meaning, the original application of taqiyya was exactly what you are talking about now. That people had to go and pretend to be something else so that they would not be persecuted. This is the origin of it. But the way that it is being implemented today is different. Today it is being abused by people. Not the way that Moosestaffah just explained it, how it was intended to be used, but it is today being used to just cheat, deceive, lie, whatever, to anybody and feel good about it. So this is a very important point that we need to clarify. The original and today's use are very different.
Yeah, no, like a lot of, you have to, I'm guessing like I have, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What are you going to say, Thunderous?
No, I was just saying about the usage, and then I wanted to go to Alpha Omega, who said, I heard the big secret is the Shias believe that Aisha really killed the Prophet and that they were somehow displaced Christians.
That's an interesting.
I've never heard of that.
Again, there's there's definitely, I wouldn't be surprised if in some Shia circles that is a belief that Aisha was responsible for killing
Or
Muhammad,
just being propagated.
or being propagated. And even then, Aisha actually, in our narrations at least, Aisha and Talha were responsible for the murder of Usman. And Usman was first struck by Talha, Aisha's quote unquote lover. And, and then they kind of like said, oh, we want murder for, I believe I somewhere read this in Major Balagha, that we want demand for Usman's murderers, and Ali's like raising his eyebrows like, I think you did it. So that's kind of like where the story takes.
Okay, but they were not displaced Christians.
Displaced the Shia, that is?
Yeah.
This is a huge accusation that that's
No. This is a question.
Oh, okay. Like the Shia being displaced Christians. It's interesting because there's a lot of parallels and similarities in how the Shia practice their religion, which is very similar to the Christians. There's also what do you call it? There's a lot of narrations. It's actually good that you asked that question. There's a lot of narrations in both Biharul Anwar and Al-Kafi about Jesus, about the Shia version of Jesus. So, imagine.
Muhammad was this. Muhammad initially was this. Look at the first numismatic evidence for Muhammad. He still had the Christian cross on him, on the coins.
No. So basically, there's a lot of, I know in Biharul Anwar as well as Al-Kafi, that there are narrations about Jesus, about how he was born, and, it's kind of somewhat consistent with the gospel, somewhat consistent with the Quranic version as well. It's kind of like blending the two. And I was surprised that there were some Shia narrations about Jesus himself. And there also must have been a lot of Iraqi Christians or Iranian Christians of that time, during the time of when Al-Kafi and Biharul Anwar were authored. And this was sort of like an attempt to bring, the Christians under the same banner of Shia Islam, that is. And Shia Islam was also embraced by the Persians most, or Iranians during the Abbasid era, because the Iranians were the most, and even during Umayyads too, Iranians were the most persecuted. They were the most enslaved group. They were the underdogs. So they kind of saw the Shia Islam is yeah, this is something I can relate to. And, Shia Islam is kind of like an underdog. And, that's kind of fighting for its survival. And that's where they kind of embrace, I think that's my theory, my own theory on that, or hypothesis. Hypothesis is a correct term.
Yeah, but I like, the deeper you go, the more you hear, the more you talk about Islam, the more that you research, and the more you ask and question, and the more you find this is just an absolute nonsense. It's amazing how much stuff there is, how many different stories, how many different concepts, how many different ideas you have. And this is a huge mishmash, and the deeper you go, the more you find this is... come on. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and even
one more question. One more question, if I just thought of it. Given consideration that the Shia are more patriarchal as opposed to the Sunni, who are more political as far as office is concerned, have the Shia not considered to employ Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi as the new spiritual leader? After all, he is the great grandson of Muhammad.
Yeah.
So surely, by implication, he would be seen as some kind of spiritual leader or some kind of spiritual significance in the Shia movement, given the patriarchal, hereditary nature of Shiism. And, we still have relatives today alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the problem and Shias acknowledge this problem, is that there's a lot of false claims to descent of Muhammad. That is, there's thousands of descendants of, I would say millions, who claim descent from Muhammad. Yeah. And these are false. That is, even, the closest thing that even comes to Muhammad is Aga Khan. And even then, he's tying in. He kind of enters the picture. His ancestors entered the picture during the British-Afghan War, actually, and that story gets very fishy. And like with the Shia, that's why they've kind of, at least with the 12ers, they've kind of appointed a temporary imamate system with the ayatollahs. Actually, like this is kind of like a temporary system that they're waiting for the Mahdi. So this is kind of like a safeguard system before the Mahdi arrives. So that's why they kind of see that there's a lot of fake Sayyids status, fake Sayyid status. That's what they see, and that's why that's why they don't. They kind of like are a bit hesitant. Like, are you really, a descendant of Muhammad? So that's my best answer to you.
Question: Are Shias more tolerant towards gay
Oh
people?
no,
I would say
not at all.
no.
Not at all. Not at all. I know for the fact that at least the earlier versions, they say that if you're, let's just say, if you've committed sodomy, or it's forbidden. That is, like if you kiss a man or a woman of the same sex, that is, a ring of fire is around your lips in hell. That's the punishment you get. And I think there's what do you call it, in Iran, that if you're a Shia, if you're a gay person, you could get hanged.
Even though, and this is the funny thing, I mean, for me, the funniest sight was two policemen walking hand in hand. But this is just because it is so prohibited. It is okay for two men to do that because it is just a sign of friendship.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, because I had long blonde hair, I was pinched in the bum by men just because I had long blonde hair. Even though it was quite obvious that I was a guy, they still were somehow inclined to pinching my bum. So this is quite funny.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, this is even with within the Shia community, that is, it's like they kind of believe that lesbian, gay, LGBTQ plus community will go to hell, and it's very intolerant. The only sect that is somewhat tolerant, you'd be surprised, is the Sunni Hanafi sect that says it's up to the ruler. But otherwise, the other sects, no, you're dead. And I think Ali is narrated to even say that, for being a homosexual, I will strike, like a sword will be given to me, and I will strike your neck as hard as I can and see how much the sword strikes you, or you're taken to the highest place and pushed down from the mountain or the building, that is. So those are the two punishments, that is. And and this was one of the reasons why I kind of like said, I've had enough.
I've also heard this because Thinking Clearly is asking, was one of the earliest caliphs gay? I've heard the story before, but I don't know if this is not a story that was fabricated by Christians or Jews or something just to make it look bad. Okay, I know a Sunni Muslim friend of mine who was very nervous while shopping at Shia-dominated area in Bahrain, hence the question. Oh, okay, that's interesting. All right. I think that's just about it. Moosestaffahh, I think all we need to do is leave you to say some closing words. And Jesus, you've taken up 1.5 hours here, and I thought you're just going to come here just for a quick rundown of the historical view on that, but it became really fascinating. It's so nice to have somebody who knows something about Shia. Because it is quite rare that we have this. So from me, a hearty thank you very much. And if you ever feel bored or something, please just pop in, do whatever. I mean, this is not something that needs to be a one-off or something, because there's always nice to have somebody who is welcome, who knows something and is very welcome here on the show. So I want to say thank you very much. Do you want to say something in closing?
Yeah, closing statements would be that even if you look at Shia history, that is, it's very complicated. So the best word I can describe everything is extremely complicated, and the theology is vastly different, and many people know very little about it. But I will do my best to give as much information as I can, and that's how I can close this with.
Thank you. Yes. And by the way, people, I need to ask this now while I still have your attention, because we didn't do a video today. But the thing is that we had so much fun doing the the Dawah in action. Because Mustafa, we have a theme of the month where we take one topic of Islam and we go into depth, and really go and spend 4 weeks only on this one topic, going into the text and looking at all this. But we have so much fun with doing this Dawah in action that we were thinking of extending it by a month and doing some more videos. Like next time, there's a short video. I just want to know from people, are you interested in this? Does anybody want to continue this? Was it fun looking at videos, debunking them, refuting them, looking at the details, commenting on them? Is this something that people like, that we should continue for another month? Or should we go and move on to the next topic and the next theme for the month? So we need to have your opinion on this. Let us know what we're going to do. Thunderous, closing remarks.
Yeah, I just want to thank Moosestaffahh for coming on the show and giving us an insight. And certainly, even though I was born into the Muslim religion, Shia, I had a slight understanding of what was taking place. Thank you for coming on the show, taking the time out, and really elaborating on that. I thought your presentation was excellent, and to continue with the sentiments of Stops, and I'm sure Robs will agree. Let this be the first, not the last time that we see you on the show. It would be good to have, it's a fresh dynamic. I'm sure that the listening audience would also agree that to have another face, another perspective, another piece of history and dynamic of Islam, but also what you brought as well is just how confusing it is for the Muslim to discern where to go, what to do. Straight after Muhammad's death, look at what's taken place in history and what has taken place in history since. And this is supposed to be the religion of peace. And your experience has really brought that out and added a further credibility into the reason why this show exists. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, I'll just echo my colleagues, and thanks very much. That was very in-depth. You obviously have quite a bit of knowledge on this, and we'd love to have you back here again.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
And not only just on Shias. I don't know if this came across the right way. Not just on Shias. This was the speciality today, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we only talk about this all the time. So you're not only welcome to talk about Shias, but on general things as well, because I'm sure you've got an opinion on other things as well. So, like I say, we're here every Friday. If you want to pop in, just give me a shout, and if you want to come more regularly, that's also fine. Like Sandra said, it's always nice to have somebody new and somebody who's knowledgeable and knows the background. So that's brilliant. So super. Okay, you decide. You take time. You go and think about it. If you want to find, that's it. So what is left for me to do is to go for the hadith of the week. Actually, I've got two this week because they're so short. We always give you something to think about. So this is from Bukhari, from a Sunni, Bukhari, book 454, number 509. And of course, it's by our popular friend Abu Huraira, who said, the Prophet said, yawning is from Satan. And if any one of you yawns, he should check his yawning as much as possible. For if any one of you, during the act of yawning, should say, ha, Satan will laugh at him. And you wouldn't want that, would you?
Well, I don't know, but I must have the devil in me tonight then.
And number 516 is also by Abu Huraira, which says, the Prophet said, if any one of you rouses from sleep and performs the ablution, he should wash his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out thrice. Thrice, not once or twice, no, thrice. Because, and there's a reason, he tells you exactly why you should do that, because Satan has stayed in the upper part of his nose all night.
Here's a tip. That could be a prophecy.
Bruce, what? Do you have another one?
No, I've heard that as a child, that you shouldn't pick your nose as a child, or Satan taking a dump over here.
Okay, Thunderous.
I was going to say, Adnan Rashid might use that as Speaker's Corner, because that could be a prophecy about the Americans using waterboarding, water in the nose.
Okay. Actually, I've heard from a doctor who said, no, this is not without risk. Because what you're doing is, if you don't make sure that the water is 100% clean, what you are doing is you're putting bacteria very close to your brain. And if you don't make sure that everything is blown out or something, what you're actually doing is you're contaminating yourself. And that is something that you don't want to do, because the upper part of your nose is incredibly close to your brain. And there's only a very thin membrane apparently between it. So she said that this habit of Muslims doing that is actually quite dangerous. So they shouldn't do that. All right, ladies, gents, others, and thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Oh, by the way, Hajj is upon us, and unfortunately, there's only a handful of people allowed in, no foreigners. Some people who were stuck in Saudi because they couldn't go home, they were very happy to be stuck because they were allowed to participate. So there's very few people running around the Black Stone at the moment. It's not the millions and millions that you normally see, but very few. So that's thanks to the coronavirus, where even Allah goes and hides when he hears Corona, Corona, Corona. Thank you very much, guys. See you next week. Have a good one. Have a good weekend. Enjoy yourselves. We'll see you next Friday. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.